On Fanalysis, we take the analytics used in fantasy football and incorporate those into the latest betting trends, and we're finding out where the smart money is landing. So let's bring in the lead betting analyst from Pickswise, Jared Smith, once again. Jared, let's start things off with the Falcons. They are 3-point home favorites against the Panthers, and let me tell you, Sam Darnold was replaced this last week, and the Panthers averaged just 2.8 yards per play. I know you love that yards per play stat. They were terrible. Is Carolina on the brink of collapse right now?
I want to say yes, but in the NFL, it has a funny way of switching very quickly. In fact, if you were going to ask me 4 weeks ago when the Panthers were 4-0 or 3-0, if they were going to be underdogs in a game against the Atlanta Falcons, who were looking absolutely dreadful the opening few weeks of the season, I would say you're a liar. But that's the push and pull of the NFL markets. This game has completely flipped on its head. A lot of smart money and a lot of public money coming in on Atlanta, as you would expect. Carolina was absolutely dreadful last week. They didn't even get to the red zone against the Giants. Credit the Giants. I did think that was a game that they needed, and they showed up. But Sam Darnold, as bad as he's looked, it's a team effort. And the offensive line hasn't looked great either. 21 sacks over the last 5 games. 21 sacks in 5 games. Yikes. Meanwhile, Atlanta's starting to play a little better, Steve. You saw them against the Jets in London. They won that game. Then they come back, and they've looked good on offense. They've scored 87 points over the last 3 games. Kyle Pitts has kind of been unleashed a little bit. And Arthur Smith's offense, 7 weeks in, starting to settle down. I think Atlanta at home's a great play. Anywhere south of a field goal. This line was 2.5 early in the week. Now it's 3. I would still play it at 3. Bookmakers we talked to this week, one of them said he makes this game Atlanta minus 7.5.
Wow.
So I think you've got room to the upside for the Falcons. I wouldn't play it at 7.5, but I think at 3 or even 3.5, I would still consider a play on the Falcons.
Well, I mean, that says a lot, though, when one of the odds makers is putting it at 7.5 and it's laying there at this point. And to reiterate what you were saying about Arthur Smith, in the last 4 games, Matt Ryan is averaging 300 yards a game. His touchdown to interception ratio is 10-1. Does it feel like Arthur Smith's offense is really starting to come together there in Atlanta?
Absolutely. And it takes time. And, it's a very impatient league. We as bettors very impatient. We see things weeks 1, 2, and 3, and we kind of treat it as gospel. But then you have to, take a step back and say it's only 10, 15% of the season. Well, now we're about 50% of the season after this week, 45-ish% of the season done. So I can start to make some more reasonable expectations and some more reasonable assumptions about what teams truly are now compared to just those first 3 weeks.
Because who did the Panthers play the first 3 weeks?
Exactly. Yeah, it was not good. Jets, Texans, they had a game against the Saints where the Saints basically had you and me coaching from the sidelines. It was not a good situation there early in the year for New Orleans in that game, and the other games were against cupcake teams that have proven to be very bad, if not 2 of the worst teams in the league this year. So I think Carolina, we got, led down a road of maybe, misleading how good they really are. Now the true Panthers team is coming out. The offensive line really is the key for me, because if there was a weakness to Atlanta, it would be, Sam Darnold pushing the ball down the field. But with that offensive line, he's not going to have time to be able to hang in the pocket and make those plays.
Especially with what the Falcons are doing on the offensive side. They're going to have to try to throw the ball as much as they can. All right, now to the Patriots. They're getting 5.5 points in L.A. against the Chargers. Let me tell you this. Mike Williams and Keenan Allen is going to be a lot harder to cover than the Jets receivers. So, are you still surprised where this line is right now?
Yeah, I do think there is a little bit of, I don't want to say baiting going on, but you saw the Patriots score, 54 points last week? And let's be honest, they're 2-2 over their last 4 games, but those 2 losses were overtime to the Cowboys, which, coin flip that game in either direction, and in that very, very tightly contested, low-scoring game against the Bucs when Brady came back to Foxborough. So you could make a case that the Patriots could be, have played well enough to win all 4 of those games. I think when you look big picture, I'm curious Justin Herbert's mindset in this game. He's still a young quarterback, and I don't want to say that there's demons going on with Bill Belichick, because usually that's the freshman quarterbacks that he has the most impact on. But Last year, Justin Herbert had his worst game as a pro, the worst loss in Chargers franchise history against this Patriots team. It was a primetime game. I believe it was a Thursday night game. So the circumstance is not quite the same, but he's probably been thinking about that game for 2 weeks now because the Chargers are coming off the bye. I'm curious what his mindset is and how he comes out because, you know, Bill Belichick has a way of terrorizing the young quarterbacks, even though the rookie quarterbacks tend to get the worst of it. But analytically, these two teams are very even. I think the Chargers have a better offense. I think the Patriots have a better defense. That kind of cancels each other out. No home field advantage at SoFi Stadium. In fact, I'd expect there to be a lot of Patriots in the building. So this feels like kind of a toss-up game, and I'm getting 5.5 points. I think that's the way to play it with New England.
Okay, I get what you're saying here because the Patriots have literally only lost one game by more than 6 points. As you stated, there were some really close losses for them, but we've got to go into their history of their wins as well, and how good do you really think the Patriots are if 2 of their wins came against the Jets and 1 of them came against the Texans?
It's a tough argument to come back against. The only thing I'll say is I don't fault teams for who their opponents are. They covered in all those games but 1.
And dominating, by the way. So, I mean, there is a little difference. It wasn't like they barely beat them by a field goal.
Yeah, and that, you know, when we talk about Carolina and the Jets in week 1, that game was as tight as it gets. The Jets even covered a couple numbers if you got a favorable one there. And in that game against the Texans was a Thursday night, and they were trailing in that game. And then they eventually came back and won. Carolina did. So when you go back and look at some of the other opponents, it's how they won those games. New England was very decisive, especially in the second half against Houston, in both halves against the Jets in both of those games. And those games that they lost, they were in them. And the only reason they didn't cover against Dallas is because the Cowboys decided to score a touchdown and not kick a field goal in overtime. You know, you could make a case that they covered that game, you know, in regulation and then just lost the cover in overtime. But the Pats have been right there. They're 3-4. The Bills are coming off of a tough loss. The division's not totally wrapped up. You know, it's pretty wrapped up, but this is one of those games that if the Patriots want to be taken seriously as a playoff team, they need to compete against the Chargers.
Oh, they're sniffing it right now. They're definitely sniffing the division lead at this point. But I want to get back to what you were talking about with coming off of the bye, because since the bye weeks actually began, favorites have beaten the spread 59% of the time coming out of the bye. However, last year was an anomaly. Favorites ended up going 13-2 coming out of the bye week. And the Chargers are coming out of the bye. I'm just kind of curious whether you think that there's going to be a trend towards the bye week favorites this year.
I can't decisively say yay or nay, but what I can do is say there will likely be some kind of actionable edge that we glean from the bye week.
You're going to learn something from this, right?
Yeah, I think the bye weeks is the most facet, because we think of the NFL as a very competitively balanced league. Usually there are bad teams and good teams, but for the most part, the bad teams can get really good fast, and vice versa. The good teams can fall back. So there's a lot of competitive balance in the NFL. The one part of the schedule that is very unbalanced is teams that are coming in on an extra week of rest against a team that isn't. And so there is always interesting things that we learn from those, nuanced parts of the schedule. The bye weeks, in my opinion, are the most nuanced part of the entire NFL schedule. I bet we learned something this year. I don't know what it is just yet.
Well, unless both the teams are coming off of a bye, which is exactly what's happening with Minnesota facing Dallas. Minnesota's a 2.5-point home dog to Dallas. The Cowboys are coming out of their bye week. Obviously, so is Minnesota. Cowboys have the ¡1 offense in the NFL. They're also undefeated against the spread. Famously, you have faded the Cowboys this entire time. But do their numbers play into your analytics at this point? The fact that they're 6-0 against the spread?
You have to imagine that there's going to be regression there. I feel the same way about the Cardinals, and you know how much we love the Cardinals. One of our first investments in the Super Bowl markets way back in March. But the point spread was designed for this exact reason not to occur. A team to go on a 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 game winning streak against the number. It's, the spread's the great equalizer in all of betting. That being said, I do think when you look at Minnesota, there are some analytical reasons to like the Vikings. Their DVOA is better. Their defense, I would say, is playing better. I think the net yards per play number that I like to examine so much is a bit skewed because of how good Dallas's offense has played. I think it's masked some of their issues on defense, giving up a lot of yards per play. And when I look at the Vikings offense, their offensive line is starting to play a lot better. Most notably, their left tackle, Christian Darrisaw, who came in, he missed a couple of games early in the year. Then he came in and took over that left tackle spot. He's a first-round pick. He's a guy that the Vikings really are going to rely on to kind of keep Kirk Cousins outright. And I've noticed Minnesota's offense, especially Dalvin Cook and Madison, the running game, getting a lot more comfortable, and Cousins being a lot more comfortable pushing it down the field with this offensive line security a little bit. And when you think about the Cowboys, again, if you can burn them deep down the field, their secondary, I know Trayvon Diggs got a ton of picks, but they've given up a lot of yards this year. They've been fortunate to cover some games that maybe they shouldn't have, like that Patriots game. And I think eventually the point spread, the market will catch up to them. And we're going to get one of these right, fading the Cowboys. Maybe this is the week, Steve. We'll take the Vikings at home catching a couple of points.
Well, I tell you what, you better make sure that Kirk Cousins knows where Trayvon Diggs is at all time, because he is on pace right now to break the NFL record for most interceptions. So keep an eye on number 7 this game. But there were a lot of early tickets, and a lot of the handle is on the Cowboys in this game. The practice availability, clearly, of Dak Prescott is going to play a big role. How much are you focusing on Dak's availability here?
Tremendous question, because I'll be honest. So I watch these lines. I mean, I understand that I have no life because I just watch these lines 24/7, 365. But on Wednesday night, after Mike McCarthy came out, I believe the quote was he has to cross the threshold. Like that, it was kind of cast a shadow of a doubt on whether or not Dak is 100%. Now, maybe he is, and maybe that's just posturing. I don't know Mike McCarthy's poker face. I know he likes to have, pajama parties with Jerry Jones, to figure out the contract situation in the offseason. But I don't know how good his poker face is. Yeah, hey, listen, if he wants to go and hang out with the owner, I wish I could hang out with Jerry Jones at his mansion. But I think when you look at the health situation of Dak Prescott, if he isn't 100%, I saw this line start to move just a little bit towards the Vikings on Wednesday night after that comment came out. And that was probably the Sharps hedging their bets a little bit, because we've seen a lot of money come in on Dallas. But now you're starting to see the line creep towards that 0 marker, even though the Cowboys have been a favorite for, a solid favorite for most of the week. Maybe that comment from McCarthy spooked the markets just a little bit, because if Dak's not 100%, this line probably closes Vikings -2.5. And if he doesn't play, it probably closes Vikings -3 or longer. I don't know if he's not going to play. The market thinks he's going to play, but I did see some buyback on the Vikings late Wednesday night.
So jump on it as early as possible if you do think that Dak Prescott won't be able to play in this game. That's his top plays of the week. Make sure you check out our other segment on Jared's specialty, the teasers. For Jared Smith and Pickswise, I'm Steve Overmyer. This is Fanalysis.